I love wrestling. I love the Fed, so I think it would take a lot for me to do this. But I can still remember the date because, the day after I produced a video on this channel called, I think, The Worst Raw Ever. It was May 6th of 2019, a day that will live in infamy because it was one of the worst wrestling shows I've ever watched. And I genuinely think if I didn't have to cover it for my job as part of that, I would have just called it at that moment. Certainly watching Monday Night Raw for a prolonged period of time. It was the night of the wild card rule. So I still remember the beats of every element of this. They tweet beforehand, Roman Reigns isn't going to be on the show, despite the fact that this SmackDown champion or the head of SmackDown he's wanting to be on Raw, he's not going to be on Raw, he's the second person out there after Vince McMahon. Walks straight out there, and Michael Cole, in his own inimitable way, says, "Welcome to Monday Night Yard." What? What's that? And they go, Vince goes, "Oh yeah, well that's why I'm introducing the wild card rule, and we're gonna have 3 people from the other show that can come over because our ratings are basically in the toilet." On that show, 6 people from well, it wasn't Friday Night SmackDown by that point, was it? It was from Tuesday Night SmackDown show up, including Shane McMahon and Elias, as well as Lars Sullivan. What an excellent use of the wild card rule straight out of the gate. But I think it's probably most infamous, that show, for taking the Usos and the Revival and saying, should we book them in a, brilliant potential 5-star match? No, let's do an angle with Usi Hot Cream, and let's have Dax Harwood, or what it was called back then, floss his jacket around his undercarriage, because that's funny, guys. It was one of the worst shows I've ever witnessed, and I was so close. If I hadn't had this brilliant job and hadn't been able to go through it with you two, I think I would have just called it right then and there.
Where did you go through it with us?
Well, I believe it might have actually been on WhatCulture Extra, but if it wasn't there, it was on the WhatCulture Wrestling podcast, available wherever you get your podcasts from.
Well, again, it's not literal, because how can I quit wrestling? I'd have to quit my job, unless it happened much earlier in life, of course. But the pandemic, the empty arena era, it certainly killed my enthusiasm for wrestling that I wasn't covering for a living, and it's taken a long while to get it back. First few weeks, kind of a novelty of the empty arena periods, the silly SmackDown where Triple H was like just ruining Michael Cole's life, and AEW moving into Daly's place, the great Cody promo with the iconic photograph and all of this stuff, and as it evolves, you're seeing people like find really creative ways to try and make the most of this dreadful situation. You've got like AEW socially distanced wrestlers shouting, trying to make some noise. Over in WWE, the first couple of cinematic matches before that format ate itself. The Boneyard was a riot. The Firefly Funhouse was a riot. But as the weeks and months got on and on and on, it just became something that wasn't an escape anymore. It was a reminder of how messed up the world was at the time. And look, obviously COVID is still about. We're just not locked down anymore. Wrestling is supposed to take you away from these things, like any other art form. You put on your headphones, listen to music, watch a movie, read a book, to get away from the bollocks that frustrates you and annoys you and brings you down about real life. You turned on your wrestling show, oh, there's no one there, there's not a sound, the wrestling's not as good, everything sucks, I'm miserable. Obviously that's a very personal reaction, but I can't be the only person who had that. The bit that symbolises it best for me was that period where AEW went to QT Marshall's gym in Georgia, or his school or whatever, and had the TV taping there, and it was like 6 weeks in this tiny room with nothing in it. And like the Lance Archer, like Marco Stunt Squash was in there, which was a lot of fun, and there was some other bits and pieces as well. But that was the point where I was like, my god, this is grim. This is utterly morbid and grim. I had to just stop watching Japanese wrestling, which is my great passion in this sport, for ages and ages and ages. Obviously those companies all took breaks and stuff, but even when, American companies were loosening restrictions, they were a bit tighter, they were a bit more careful, and noise didn't fully come back to Japanese shows until this year. And that's not a comment on like measures and restrictions and stuff. I think that you need to protect your citizens. I'm totally cool with that, but it was very hard for me to be enthusiastic about all of this. I like noise, I like rackets, I like dins. You weren't getting that in that era. It was the least enjoyable period of my professional fandom, without a question of a doubt, and I'm very glad that we're back in buildings now and we can actually hear noise.
Now I can actually honestly sit here and say that I have never once in my 20 years, pretty much, of watching wrestling, which is a scary thought. I have never once completely gone, you know what, I'm done with this, I'm finished wrestling, you've broken my heart, I am out of here. Never once. But there was a moment, there was definitely a moment when I got that close, very close. And weirdly enough, it was just before I got this gig, this WhatCulture job. It was like towards the end of 2019, I think I started with WhatCulture in 2020, and I was there. I was just on the edge because... Right, I'll be honest, the whole Kofi Mania thing was unbelievable. It was incredible. Everyone knows it. It was just such a highlight moment in wrestling history, really. It was awesome. But the run that came after it, all the Kofi kind of WWE Championship run, it was a bit hit and miss at times. But you still thought, you know what, Kofi could come good, he's just been incredible, he deserves the run, he deserves more respect, and even if it does have to come to an end, hopefully they do it in like a big old classic match, and then he just like passes the title on, and it's all like a respectful thing, and that's fine. But that's not what we got. On the first ever SmackDown in like October, whatever it was, in 2019, they just murdered him. They had Brock Lesnar go out there and beat him in like 4 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever it was, and I was embarrassed for him. I just felt so sad, and it just made me really sit there and question, why am I watching this? Why am I investing my time and energy into this product, this wrestling stuff, when it's just gonna destroy my soul when I watch this kind of stuff, when the people you root for and care about just get battered and humbled and just broken in the middle of the ring and just kind of pretty much get like a physical 2 fingers up at you for all the hard work you've done. It just felt like a slap in the face to all these people that had supported Kofi for so long. And then what it set up was pointless anyway, because the Cain Velasquez Brock Lesnar thing, it didn't need the belt. It was just silly, stupid stuff. And if it wasn't for AEW starting at the exact like kind of same moment in time, I believe it was that very month, of course, I don't know what I would have done, because I was really having my doubts, and I was really on the edge of kissing goodbye to this wrestling world, and we wouldn't be here now, would we? Doing this video, talking about stuff, and I would not be wearing this AEW t-shirt. What a crazy world.
So the first time I fell off wrestling was during sort of the John Cena era, but I don't think I could talk about that because it wasn't like there was a specific moment. I think it was just I was growing up, and also I maybe had less access to wrestling, and also less people in my life that were also watching wrestling, so it wasn't as fun because a lot of people I knew were moving on. But from there, you know, I lapsed and I came back, and for a long time I would watch Raw and SmackDown and then NXT every week, and then what kind of happened was I would watch Raw and SmackDown on sort of fast forward and watch NXT, then I would watch Raw and SmackDown on the YouTube clips and watch NXT, and then I would just watch NXT, and that was it. And I think I've said this before, NXT Black and Gold, my favourite promotion of all time. Nothing's ever going to top it. It's always going to be, and it was just a moment of my life. I think, you know, it's already kind of nostalgia for me. It just hit at the right time. It was a staple of my week. I loved it, and I loved the format. It wasn't to everybody's tastes, the kind of wrestling they were doing, but I also really liked how obviously it was developmental and people would move on, but by the time that the big stars at the top had moved on, we were already getting some guys up to take their place. And then we had a hard line of this is the end of NXT, or the NXT that you know. It was before the 2.0. It was just NXT is now colourful. We've wrapped up a bunch of stories. Loads of guys are moving on. Johnny Gargano, Adam Cole are going elsewhere or on the bench and waiting for their contracts to run out, that kind of stuff. And obviously the last moment was Ciampa losing the belt to Bron Breakker. Bron Breakker. And I have no issue with Bron or any other guys, you know, that came through the system up to this point. Obviously, I think a lot of them are clearly going to be the future of WWE, and I have no issue with it. I can't really comment. I don't watch NXT, but that was the moment where I was like, I think I'm out. Like, I loved the way that NXT almost moved through seasons. It was like, here's the old characters, out with the old, in with the new, but at just a nice pace where you were already invested in something else when somebody left. This was a hard line of, right, here's all the new guys, here they are, brand new, colourful thing. It was no longer the grungy, grimy, underground show that I loved. It was something completely new. So it was an appropriate time for me to be like, okay, I guess I'm done. What's over on AEW, I suppose?
Well, it's going to be a boring video because everyone's going to say the same thing. It was Triple H's reign of terror and the complete botch job of the invasion. I could and couldn't believe what they did at the same time. You had this thriving scene in the 1990s with an international flavour, with a new approach to like presenting characters across ECW and WCW. WWF eventually subsumed this, cracked mainstream with the brilliance that was Steve Austin, and even in 2000 you had different styles like Kurt Angle's technical brilliance. You know, you had those absolutely incredible TLC stunt wars, you had these awesome arena brawls and this big match drama, and even like at WrestleMania 17, like, I hate to put them over, but the McMahon melodrama at the time, it was the original buffet. And then what happened is that WWF didn't put them out of business, they just destroyed themselves. ECW, that was a different, albeit a little bit similar story. They had less of a fighting chance. Either way, as you well know, it got monopolised, and you had the opportunity to do 2 separate shows, 2 very different feeling shows. You couldn't do the Invasion straight away, that's a video unto itself, but nonetheless, even if you couldn't do the Invasion, there was nothing stopping WWE from identifying the audience, the very lapsed audience who had time to get back into it and present different visions of professional wrestling for them. And instead they just went, nah, Triple H doing an arthritic impression of 1986 Ric Flair, a pathetic one at that, and that's the way to go for 2 years. It was an absolute abomination. It was total and utter hubris. I'm surprised this company still exists to this day, not least of which with Triple H on top. It's like there's no justice, there's no karma. It was just not only was it infuriating on a matter of principle of why you would just be so arrogant about it, but like, it was just so dull. It was just so interminably dull. Have you ever seen Triple H versus Kane versus Goldberg from Armageddon 2003? Oh my god, you've seen nothing like it. It's just the death of everything. And it's not even the most offensive Triple H Reign of Terror match. Genuinely, it isn't. And what's really annoying is like the mentality behind it. Like, they did this not because like they thought they were the best, but they thought they were the best and the most arrogant, like by default. Like, nothing else could possibly be good except the thing they thought was good. And it was Triple H just thinking, oh, you know what, well, you know, WCW, that was really hot, we could probably revive that. ECW was really cool, we could maybe do something there, but no, my dick's bigger. My dick's much bigger, much bigger. You know what? You jumped in the pool on a cold day because that audience shrunk. That audience shrunk over years and years and years, so were you right? Yes, because you're booking it now, you're doing it really well. Makes me fucking sick!
Nothing. It's a sickness, it's a disease that I have, and I wear it proudly, to be honest, but the closest I ever came was in the summer of 2013. Before the game Triple H was the real best booker in wrestling. He was kind of the worst pretend one. Playing a fake authority figure, having screwed Daniel Bryan out of the title at SummerSlam 2013 would have been fine if it was isolated into a shocking moment, a devastating moment with which Daniel Bryan was able to fairly quickly recover from and then make the big comeback story. Ideally, maybe, let's say before, I don't know, Survivor Series, something like that, especially because it was only over Randy Orton, who we'd seen time and time and time again. But what we got time and time and time again was Randy Orton beating down Daniel Bryan, was The Shield beating down Daniel Bryan, was Triple H physically and mentally beating down Daniel Bryan, until it became apparent that Vince McMahon wanted to beat down Daniel Bryan so much that we weren't supposed to like him anymore. Not ideal, but fine if you are presenting a product that you can enjoy instead. CM Punk, having given Brock Lesnar one of his best matches ever, was getting beaten down by a feud with Ryback. Friend of the channel, but like not really a friend of the wrestling fans necessarily. SmackDown had become a recap show. There was so little within WWE that was exciting the fans that Daniel Bryan became a lifeline, if nothing else, especially if you were a sad and tragic lifer like I am. There was this one identifiable wrestler that you could believe was going to make it back to the top, and you're like, they still know how to do this, and then they would show you time and time again that they no longer did. I've told the story a million times of attending a house show in Birmingham in the UK and Daniel Bryan being taken to the other side for a Raw event, and the Big Show turned up aping the yes chants as he did every time and saying, hey guys, Daniel Bryan told me to kick this guy's ass tonight, because they were booing everything. Fans hated everything, and as a wrestling fan, I couldn't even go elsewhere. It was a bleak time. 2013 in TNA was as good as dead because Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff had killed it. Ring of Honor was on its arse, struggling to recover from Jim Cornette's own little reign of terror there, and my own personal relationship with New Japan didn't start till much later, even though it should have started in 2013, because magazines for years told me that Prince Albert was good there. And when he came back and was terrible as Lord Tensai, I just assumed they'd been lying. So I just didn't turn up for another 3 years. So yeah, summer 2013 was as close as it came. And then the dead man got his ass kicked at WrestleMania, and I was back writing.
The moment that made me quit wrestling. I'm one of those rare, possibly quite sad people who have never actually quit professional wrestling. Although by this point it's likely some variation of Stockholm Syndrome, admittedly. But that's a topic for another day. But yeah, there were times as a kid when maybe I didn't have as much access to certain shows as I'd like, but I'd always go to friends' houses to watch when I couldn't watch it at home. I'd go to relatives. I'd still be getting the action toys. I'd still buy the WF magazine, the badass WCW comics, anything I could get my hands on. Power Slam magazine, VHS tapes. So yeah, don't get me wrong, there's been times when I've been left extremely frustrated, disappointed by things that have happened in wrestling, but there's yet to be something that's kind of pushed me fully over the edge where it's just like, nah, I'm done with this now. It's been a good ride. Off I pop. I don't know. I guess if there was right now, well, this year has probably been as close as I've come, just because of the weird, the internet, man. Who'd have ever thought the internet would be a weird old place, especially social media? But I don't know if you want to call it the tribalism, the toxic fandom, all of that stuff. Just I'm a very chilled out, relaxed, happy-go-lucky kind of guy. That stuff just does not appeal for me. That tarnishes the wrestling experience, where it's like, come on. Let people like what they like. Just because they don't like what you like doesn't mean you have to dump on it. It's a weird old mindset. I do not get it. So there have been times in recent months where I've maybe thought, if this is what professional wrestling is these days, maybe it's not for me. But I fully appreciate that what we see on the internet, what we see on social media, is a small slither of the wrestling community, and the idiots that scream into their screens are an even smaller slither of that. So yeah, I mean, and then if there are ever dark times, then, you know, I could pop on the Royal Rumble 92, I could pop on WrestleMania 8, I could pop on King of the Ring 1993, my favorite ever pay-per-view, to get the bad taste of my mouth. But yes, I've never quit professional wrestling. There are times these days where I do question whether this world is for me. But no, always keep on coming back, because even in the down times, there's always that anticipation, that excitement, that hope that something good's around the corner. And when professional wrestling's good, there's nothing like it, man. So keep the faith, as Bon Jovi said.